So on that note, enough about me, enough about us for a few minutes, and I'm going to bring on some of our great speakers, starting with Chris Chesebro. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Chris before I formally bring you on. Chris and I met a decade ago when he was at L'Oreal, but Chris has really worked across such a diverse set of consumer product categories. He's worked at Ralph Lauren and Brooke Brothers. He's been agency side at OMD. And then he spent nearly the last decade of his career diving deep into beauty at L'Oreal, Coty, and now Wella. He's the global chief digital officer. And whenever I am thinking about where I want to take MikMak, Chris is one of my first calls to pick his brain and get his take on where the industry is heading. So hello, Chris.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks so much for having me. And I really appreciate the kind intro. Great to be here.
So excited to have you. I'm going to break my screen so everyone can just see our faces. So,
Brilliant.
Chris, you've worked at a lot of big namesake brands where if I say Brooke Brothers, people know Suits. Now, if I say Wella, I don't know if everyone knows what's in the Wella portfolio or even the Wella story. So as a starting place, please tell me about Wella.
Sure, absolutely. So Wella Company is a company that's squarely focused against the professionally credentialed beauty segments of hair and nail. We operate in more than 100 countries, and our biggest brands are Wella Professionals, OPI, Clairol, GHD. We also own Briogeo, Sebastian Professionals, Nioxin Professionals. So really businesses that were born in a hair salon or nail salon environment and then have expanded into more omni-channel distribution and omni-channel footprints since then. The company's actually 144 years old now. It was founded actually as a wig company in Germany back in the 19th century, and that has just evolved ever since then. And really, over the past 10 or 15 years, the company's gone through a lot of transition. We've changed ownership structure multiple times. We were family owned, then we were owned by Procter & Gamble, then we were owned by Coty. And now since 2020, we've been a standalone private company that is based both in Geneva and in New York. And we're really focused on being able to drive growth in our categories, because we really are the only global multinational that is only focused on these categories of beauty. So it's really our bread and butter and what we sleep and breathe every single day.
So, that ownership structure, while it seems unique, the reality is there's more stories than not about like that today, where they were part of a publicly traded company and then there was some sort of divestiture. I look at the last decade of major CPG portfolios, and it seems like there's more divestitures and shifts to PE structures than ever before. What do you think that signals of what's going on in the industry?
I think, and it's not just specific to beauty, we see it across multiple categories. You see Unilever talking about potentially shedding its ice cream business. I think a lot of companies are looking for focus. There are very diverse go-to-market models for these different categories and for these different businesses. And the route to market for a traditional grocery business versus the route to market for a premium retail business, let alone a D2C first business, is very different. The capabilities you need are different. You need to be able to figure out how to manage talent across all of those different verticals and different capabilities. So my personal opinion, a Chris Chesebro opinion, not a Wella Company opinion, is that companies are looking to focus and focus on the places that are core to their, we would say in French, their métier, like their core skill set. I think that's what we're seeing happen in the market. And even when you read the analysis that comes out in the FT or any of the other publications, it does seem to be about driving focus on core areas of profitability, core areas of growth, and the capabilities needed to drive them.
So you just mentioned two KPIs that probably ring true to everyone here, which is profit and growth. In your role as Chief Digital Officer, how does your scope impact those two metrics?
Sure. So I think I'll probably start by just defining what digital at Wella means, because digital means something different for basically every single company. For us, it's really three key pillars. The first is our e-commerce business. Now, the e-com people in the markets work for the markets. They don't work for my organization, but we enable them with the tools they need to run their businesses, i.e., our partnership with MikMak as an example of that, but then also all of our core website infrastructure, direct-to-consumer infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. The second big component is our digital experience and technology group, who's delivering against all of that technology work. And then there's a third group that's focused on data and AI, which is really looking at enterprise data and our AI acceleration program. Like I'm sure every company on the phone has some form of AI acceleration program going at the moment. The way that we are focusing in on growth and profitability for our business is one, looking for revenue pools that are non-existent in our current structure. I think a lot of folks are focusing in on the rise of marketplaces on TikTok shops and Shein and now ASOS and Zara are building marketplaces. So I think that's an area of opportunity for a lot of different businesses, especially businesses that skew potentially a little bit older in demographic versus younger in demographic. The second is around the cost of running our business. Because we operate in a very centralized technology model, we're able to consistently drive the cost of running the business down because of the way that we run it. And then the third area is providing insights and new capabilities from a data perspective. We recently created a central data structure that unified all aspects of data, everything down from master data management all the way up to the board reporting that we use various visualization tools into one vertical. And that's really allowed us to increase the pace of delivery of new reporting capabilities. And then I could spend the next 20 minutes talking about the different AI work that bodies of AI work that we're doing. But that's a place where we're really focused in on content creation, optimization of customer service, and deploying capabilities like Copilot to our employees to help them manage their days better and be more effective in their existing work hours.
So let's talk about AI for a second,
Sure.
maybe not 20 minutes, but at least a few seconds. When you think about your investments in AI, like when I just heard you describe at least those three initiatives, it seems like there maybe is a thesis that AI should increase our productivity.
Mhm.
Are there other things that you believe these AI investments will yield for the organization?
Absolutely. I think we look at it in a very oversimplified fashion as increase in productivity or decrease in cost. And I'll be very clear, we do not have an employee replacement program assigned to our AI work. It's really about augmenting capabilities and augmenting the capabilities of our existing employees and helping them do more with the same amount of resource. That's really been what our focus has been. On something like content creation, it is about being able to do more of that work ourselves and not be as reliant on third parties to deliver against that content creation. For example, I can create content that can go to one of our consumers by using some of the tools that we have now brought into our capability set. Now, I don't spend my time doing that, but the tools are simple enough that I can do that if I would like to. But it really is about giving our employees more capabilities. And the way that I'm thinking about it, especially in the GPT sphere type of way of thinking, this to me is the next evolution of search capabilities. And I know that's a little bit reductive in the way to think about it, but the proliferation of these types of tools, it's just like we used to have Ask Jeeves back in the day, and then things have simplified down to a triopoly, quadropoly in terms of search. I believe the same type of thing is going to happen in AI, but it won't be 4 or 5 players. It'll probably be a couple of dozen players. Versus the hundreds and hundreds that exist right now.
It's interesting. In 2024, ChatGPT started to pop as a source of referral traffic to our customers, including Wella. So it's absolutely disrupting search. Now,
Yes.
Zuckerberg in his recent earnings painted a picture of what he believes AI might do to advertising. And, there was a lot of conversation because it was a pretty drastic picture. He pretty much said, hey, one day you're going to be able to go to Meta and say, increase my sales by 10%. That's all you input into the ad manager. And it takes care of the rest, meaning there's no human intervention in creative. media strategy, audience targeting, campaign objective, like
Right.
it just does everything. How does that feel as a brand leader where you would have maybe no control over that other than just saying, increase my sales by 10%?
You know, the way that the question's framed, honestly, I like the sound of that. I like the idea of being able to dramatically oversimplify it. Now, I juxtapose that with that's a walled garden and it's one partner, obviously a very large and important partner, but I would also be concerned about the disintermediation between ourselves and the consumers that those ads and messages are being served to. So my initial reaction would be something like, that sounds great, but I would want that interface to be owned by Wella. I would want that to be similar to when, we turned over the programmatic contracts to the agencies, but then took the programmatic contracts over to the advertisers in the early 2010s. I would want the exact same type of concept for the interface between a Meta or one of Meta's competitors and our ability to brief our media investments.
I like that perspective a lot. On top of just AI disruption, consumer product companies as a whole have experienced a lot of volatility, and also especially the beauty category. Coming out of the pandemic, the Chinese consumer is no longer the Chinese consumer that we once knew. So you had to deal with that headwind. Then you're dealing with everything else in terms of the cost of goods is more expensive than ever before, the pressures from retailers. Now media channels have become political in Trump's first 100 days in office. Like there's so much coming at you. As a leader, like one, how are you staying sane? And two, how are you navigating your team through all of this change?
Sure. So I think when you think about the past 5 or 6 years now at this point, for the vast majority of us, this has been the most volatile period that we've ever experienced. Unless folks who lived through some of the larger scale conflicts in the 70s and in the 60s and 70s, it's a totally different world for what we experienced for the first kind of 15-ish years of our careers, 15, 20 years of our careers to the past 5 or 7. So I believe very fundamentally that constant change is the new normal. And the focus that I have with our teams is keeping them lasered in on what our objectives are. And the fact that at the end of the day, we serve a lot of small businesses. Because in the professional beauty world, you're talking about mom and pop hair salons, nail salons. Yes, of course, you have big chains as well, but the vast majority of them are small businesses. And in almost every single economy around the world, small businesses are what keep things going. And our objective, one of our objectives, is to be able to help enable those small businesses to do the work they want to do. Hairdressers and nail technicians love their jobs. Don't go into it for the money. It is not an investment banking career by any stretch of the imagination, but they're real passionate artists. And our ability to help them live that every day, their business grows, our business grows. It really is a win-win in that type of scenario. And I think one of the other things that is great about Wella Company is all of our employees benefit from our growth. Our primary shareholder, KKR, talks very openly about the concept of broad-based employee ownership. And that's something where, as we are successful, our employees will be successful as well. So of course, it's still a business. We still have to run it like a business, but there really is a benefit for every single person who works for Wella Company as we drive more and more success for ourselves.
I mean, I love that about the PE model, and especially KKR. They're so forthcoming around this.
Exactly.
Earlier, when you were talking about disruption, you mentioned the proliferation of marketplaces, and you talked about TikTok Shop. And given that you're in the beauty category, that's obviously the fastest growing channel within TikTok Shop. And what I find so interesting is, despite all the headlines in the US, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure Trump will continue to kick that can down the road, it's a big focus globally. Like no matter what you're selling, every single type of customer I talk to, especially outside of the US, wants to invest in TikTok Shops as a growth channel. Tell us, what have you learned being on the front lines with TikTok Shop?
So a couple of things I would say. One, making logistics work is very important with TikTok shops.
Mhm.
They have various different serve models, distribution service models between fulfilled by TikTok, or they have an Amazon product that they can leverage. Of course, if you have your own direct-to-consumer business through a Shopify or whatever else, you can connect there. But the logistics model is something that I would really counsel folks to pay attention to, because it can slow you down. In certain places, we've not moved as fast as I would like because of that. The second one is, and this again, this is a Chris Chesebro opinion and not necessarily a Wella company opinion, but I no longer see TikTok as a social platform. I see it as a retailer.
Mm.
And you really see that in the way that the volume of sales goes through TikTok shops. Very little of it goes through a brand store. The vast majority of it goes through creators.
Mhm.
And it's closer to the 100 than it is to the 50 in terms of what goes through creators versus what goes through shops.
Yeah.
So it really is about managing creator relationships. So I would say focus in on logistics. Don't think about it like you think about the other social platforms, and make sure that your creator strategy is crystal clear, and you have dedicated resource to deliver against that. Because the setup time, the investment in people capital and in cost is there. And the last thing I would say is be ready to pay for it in the beginning. It
Yeah.
is not something, it is not a if you list it, they will come environment.
Mhm.
It does require investment.
Yeah, Chris, you hit it all on the head. I think the biggest misnomer going into TikTok shops is the always on creator strategy. And in many ways, you got to spray and pray, which some
Yep.
brands aren't comfortable with. It's a totally
Right.
unique environment. Chris, we're obviously at a MikMak event. And I have to ask you, when you think about driving profitability and driving growth, how is MikMak helping Wella do this?
Sure. So very simply, the vast majority of our brands do not have direct-to-consumer e-commerce infrastructure. And the build out, as everyone I believe has had some type of experience with, if you're taking a legacy infrastructure and trying to turn it D2C, it's not the most cheap thing to do in the world. So, our ability to have a degree of shoppability on our brand.coms in a way that leverages the retailer relationships that MikMak has helps us skip that step. And the other area would be understanding the insights that come, especially with the MikMak 3.0 platform. I have it open in my Chrome browser behind us because I do look at it on a regular basis. So I would say it's really those two things. It's our ability to have an e-commerce experience both in media and on our brand.coms, and the insights that come from leveraging the MikMak 3.0 platform.
So I want to point out one thing that Chris said, because I truly believe that there is a difference in executives by this one particular thing. Chris logs into the software platforms that the organization buys, and he has a C-suite title. And I can't even tell you how many leaders don't log into the platforms, meaning they're not practitioners of the tools that they're investing in to drive their business growth. And Chris, I think that's a defining characteristic of you.
I appreciate that. Now, I will say I am by no means an expert, and I'm probably more dangerous than my team would appreciate in my asking of questions that come from that. But I agree. I think it's important to have hands-on operational knowledge of the tools that our teams are using, because all of these things, they do cost money, and making sure that we're maximizing the value that we get for those investments is also really important.
Final question for you.
Please.
Fast forward, it's the year 2030, and you're charged with continuing to drive Wella's growth. What parts of the strategy are the same as they are today, and what parts do you think are different?
I think what's going to be the same is our continued investment and focus on our professionals, because they are the core of our reason to believe for our brands. They are the heart of our industry. And I don't see that changing for us at any point in time. And I started at Wella just over 5 years ago after 10 years at L'Oreal, and the transformation that we've had within the Wella, my 5 years in Wella, has been extraordinary. Obviously, we can't really talk about it publicly because we're a private company, but I'm very happy with the transformation that we've driven. And for me, in 2030, where I would see us we are the undisputed leader in the professionally credentialed beauty space. That's where I see us in the future. And what's going to continue to get us there is continued focus on our professional communities, continued focus on upskilling our employees and giving them new capabilities. And I think by then, digital won't be a thing anymore. It will be the thing. And I don't anticipate that there will be even be a digital team. I think there will just be the team. And that to me is true success.
Well, Chris, thank you for letting us pick your brain. So appreciative of your partnership. Everyone watch Wella, because there's pretty incredible things happening there in terms of transformation. And talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. Great to see you.